Okay, so this is the brief update that covers what actually happened in the time jump, and then there'll be a written version that should come out in the next week or so that'll have more details. What this covers is just so that players can start to move into leagues and know what happened. It covers the topics: Wizard Trade Order Wars, the Vampire Narrative, the Dead Plague Escalation, Black Spire Rising, Andean Renaissance, Soraconia Rebels, and the Dark Wilds Reconstruction. And so those are the main things I'm covering here. I also will cover at the end time jump gold for characters, and then like where play locations are at. So first, Wizard Trade Order Wars. The Wizard Trade Order was coming in from the south. They tried to take over a lot of Rokron and get their wizard school back. They succeeded at doing that, but they were pretty roughed up in the time jump and very well held back. They only control a small section of Rokron at this point, mostly just the bottom corner. They didn't even succeed at taking over all of Soraconia. They tried occupying it different times, but they've been pushed out, so Soraconia actually has whole sections that it's still in control of. So that went really well for most players. The goal is to keep Wizard Trader from taking over, but they do still have a stake in trying to take over things. Part of this, the spin-off of that is the next thing is the Vampire Narrative. The Vampire Narrative has to do with one of the reasons that the Wizard Trader said that they showed up was because Rokron has a vampire problem, and that they are here to help root out those vampires and destroy them and reestablish order. And that's a narrative that seemed to work fairly well across Rokron, since there was a lot of vampire activity, and there are many people who actually agree with that and feel that a Wizard Trader would be in fact better at keeping order in all these situations. So what happened over time is that people started to use this narrative, the vampire narrative, which is that whenever there was a situation that where a government was becoming dangerous, or a government was becoming a threat to another government, then the vampire narrative would be brought in, which is that there's vampires there, and that's why that government is dangerous, and we need to root them out and destroy them. And so this has become a common theme that you will see people using the vampire narrative. And the belief that there are vampires, all throughout. This dates way back to some of the first rumblings of the Free Republics. The Dead Plague escalation. There was a lot of attempts to thwart that and figure out what's going on with it. There was a lot of research into it. A lot of people who tried to research it ended up in very dangerous situations, running into vampires. So there is a connection, I believe, between the Dead Plague escalation and the vampires at this point, and that the Dead Plague escalation was kept from becoming extremely dangerous to the level of like where it annihilated everything, everyone in Rokron. Pinnacle got involved, Aspenred got involved, and even the Wizard Trade Order got involved to try to keep it under control. They've been trying to figure out what causes the plague, and for the most part, they believe that it has to do with a contaminant that actually everyone in Rokron has, and therefore it's very, very difficult to remove, and that it's in everything, that or at least all the people of Rokron, and so without like annihilating all of them, you have a difficult time removing it, given that it's also very resistant to the usual kinds of healing spells and that sort of thing. Many people believe they are on to a cure, and that this season will be focusing on the moment that people have actually started to think they figured this out, but it's still being kept very secretive because the forces that would not want them to know, that they have a cure would be, it's important for them not to know. So in terms of the effects of that Dead Plague escalation, mostly it's that people will reanimate much more quickly than normal. It used to be that they would reanimate only at the end of an encounter. This season it looks like people will reanimate immediately if they're killed. So if you kill someone, this is by the way only humanoids, but if you kill a humanoid, they will immediately, they'll count to 20 and they'll get up as a zombie and immediately start attacking everything around them. They don't seem to have extreme abilities, they're just zombies. But zombies that are left in that state for a while, days, weeks, then become very, very advanced zombies, to the point where you wouldn't really call them zombies anymore. You'd probably call them shamblers, or you would call them something else, a new term, and that we don't have a name for at this point. So that's definitely a big development. Black Spire Rising. So Black Spire has really consolidated. They did end up winning back their city in the battles that they did, and they've been given back Mytholinen, and that is a big deal. They've had a lot of wars with the Dark Spikes, who are not eradicated but are like hiding out in the Blackspire Mountains. There's a lot of tension about what Blackspire is going to do now that they've unified, but given there was so much chaos and there were a lot of opposition to Wizard Trade Order and trying to gain allies where they could, it was seen to be advantageous to have this kind of an allegiance. So that Blackspire becoming old Blackspire again, and then seeing where they go from there is also going to be a major theme for this coming season. The ND9 Renaissance. ND9 really had some big breakthroughs this season. They've been trying to kind of create a more pacifist Star Nation and have alliances with people around them. There was a wedding. The king of ND9 ended up getting married, and didn't marry a high elf at this point. It was kind of surprising at this point. Married with a wood elf and higher royalty lines, which is really significant because it ends up being a physical marriage between different elven groups that's seen as both symbolic and also they seem to really, the individuals seem to really like each other. It didn't end up being actually just seemed a straight political marriage, which ended up being really great, and that really caused a belief in that perhaps there is hope for the elves not just killing each other endlessly. So that's great to Renaissance. There was a great amount of loss of relics and other sorts of items that were destroyed and in some catastrophes over the 27 years. But overall, the NN9 did very well, and they're sort of seeing a real flowering of culture and really attaining the goals that they'd set out to attain, and have become kind of a seat of the new Free Republics. So in terms of the Free Republics, NN9 is sort of spearheading that. Amir Ford ended up becoming a major player as well, and Estrock Keep, and those three countries along through the middle have sort of become the new movers and shakers on the mainland, with Pinnacle out at the sea as the new seat of the Free Republics, opposed to the Wizard Trade Order and trying to galvanize other groups. Those four tend to have the most interaction and relation with each other. The rest have pulled in and become very isolationist. You'll see a lot of countries like Odolathan, Ilianos, Sodlin, Stonehammer, Ionian, Oriri, Temnor, Geb, all becoming very personal about their own boundaries and their own goals, and nobody else's. And so they're a bit more isolationist. Sorconian rebels. So I mentioned Sorconians a little bit, but there's a large group of Sorconian rebels. Sorconia is going to see a lot of action in Sorconia. They're still dealing with certain Shadowlands remnant issues. They're also dealing with the Wizard Trade Order being right there, but Wizard Trade Order doesn't have as much of a stronghold on the actual island itself as was feared, and the rebellions and being occupied over these 27 years and pushing them out. It seems that Sorconia has done a very good job of actually maintaining their homeland and not becoming just a completely occupied nation. They actually then can help to resist the Wizard School right across the way and prevent them from taking over more of Rokron. Dark Wilds Reconstruction went pretty well, actually. The Dark Wilds seemed to have been mostly contained. It didn't grow at all, mostly just sort of filled itself back in, and it's in a little section up at the top where it didn't take over any of the Ilianos Plateau anymore. It didn't move into Svodland. It's just sort of staying in a little pocket and filling in areas a lot around Axioms. And it seems to also be a lot less sort of directed. It's a much more wild and more resembling more of a real forest than it would otherwise. So that's my updates. I can look to do more when I can. I can keep this one short. But time jump information. So time jump money. It looks like people will be getting 100 gold times their rank. So that's a little bit different than in the past, which so it's quite a bit less, but that's because the Wizard Trade Order did succeed in just crashing the economy. Play locations are Wednesday League is Menonos, Thursday League is Estrock Keep, Club League is Astongrad, Character League is the Western Isles, and Adult League is Blackspire. It's 27 years gone by, so I think that's it. All right, I'll talk to you more later. Bye.